Creation, Book of Portals, Chapter 3. She was blinded by the impossibly bright lights. She couldn't make out the faces of the figures that stood above her, but she felt her body relax. She was finally rescued. Then she noticed her body didn't just relax. It went limp. She couldn't move. She was suddenly trapped in her body, and as she tried to fight it, her vision darkened. The edges of her sight blurred as she was forced to sleep. She was on the International Space Station again, preparing for her third day. Her next task was to repair a malfunctioning external camera. She was fully suited. Wait. She turned around, confused. Wasn't she already here? Didn't she already experience this? As she turned back around, she realized her physical body left her behind. Her current body was transparent, separated from her solid body, which had continued on checking that her suit was properly fastened. It was unfazed by what was happening. Oh. She was having one of those out-of-body experiences that her colleague during training would tell her about. He would tell her stories about astral projection where you could see your body lying still, safe in bed while your spirit roamed free around the universe. She wasn't totally convinced that what she was currently experiencing was that, but she had no other arguments, especially as she watched her own solid body as it casually walked away from her in the heavy suit. Even though her spirit body was also dressed in a suit, she felt weightless. It was an empty kind of weightless, though. She was like a ghost as she floated to follow her body. The eyes of her solid body didn't even notice that there was a detached version of her by her side, watching her. She stalked herself as her solid body made preparations for her spacewalk, unaware of what was about to happen to her. Suddenly, another astronaut floated through her ghost form, pausing to nod at her physical body. The Russian. She allowed her physical body to continue on. The Russian didn't notice her ghost form either, so she stayed behind to watch him, curious. Something was making him uncomfortable. She studied him and noticed his shoulders were pulled to his body, too high and too tense. He was pacing, well, the zero-gravity version of it. He seemed impatient, guilty. She caught him glancing at her physical body a bit too long before he spoke into his radio in a hushed tone.
She's almost in position.
Position? Oh. Her task that day was to repair a faulty camera on the outside of the station. Currently, her physical body had finished its spacewalk checks and was headed to exit the station. She remembered. The person who was supposed to monitor her spacewalk was the Canadian. As if answering her thoughts, the Canadian's voice responded back to the Russian.
Ready.
After this was communicated through his radio, the Russian immediately turned around, swiftly floating back in the direction he came. She followed him, listening to him as he counted under his breath. What was he doing? He entered a small room labeled monitors, where the inside walls were covered in dozens of screens. On the screen, she could see the recordings of both the interior and exterior of the station from almost every angle. Under each screen was a label corresponding to the angle at which it was located. One screen was blank. It was labeled ISS Exterior Flank R9. This was the camera she was tasked in repairing. She looked at the other screens, searching for the location of her physical form. She found it. She was already on the exterior of the space station, determined and focused. She remembered that though her task was to fix the one disabled camera, it was standard procedure to check each camera between her and the one that needed repair, just in case. Her physical body was nearing the first camera on the exterior when the Canadian spoke through the Russian's radio.
Radio disconnected. Communication to ground disabled.
His voice was clinical, lifeless. The Russian pulled the radio to his mouth. His voice was unsure. She could hear it in the way his thick accent wavered as he responded.
What about the pack?
The Canadian answered back quickly.
Disabled. Do it now.
The Russian hesitated.
Are you sure?
The Canadian responded back, menacing.
Now.
She watched as her physical body moved along the outside of the station. Her solid body reached the first external camera and started checking the wiring. Once satisfied, she moved on. As she maneuvered to the next camera, the Russian switched the feed off on the first camera. This continued on. The Russian would turn off an external camera, the timing of which coincided with each camera her physical body checked, making it seem as if her solid body was disconnecting them instead of checking them. She understood now. They wanted to hide evidence of their involvement. They were framing her. She knew what was next. The impending events flashed through her mind. She had to stop it. But how? As her ghost form, she raced to catch up with the physical version of her. While turning a corner, part of her arm phased through a wall, surprising her. Of course. She was essentially a ghost. Using this newly discovered skill, she phased through the wall to make it to the exterior of the station. Once outside, she searched for the camera. She knew exactly where it was located. She had spent hours studying the location of each and every camera to prepare for her first major task. A left, another left, straight down, around the corner. Finally, she found it. A short distance away, she saw her physical body closing in on the malfunctioning camera. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the Canadian. He was supposed to trail her, making sure she was safe. He held in his hand her tether that connected her safety harness to the side of the station. He was supposed to pull her back in the case that something went wrong. Instead, she witnessed as the Canadian snuck out a blade. With the cameras powered off, no one would know that he was the one that cut the line. She flew to stop him, thrusting her hand forward to punch him, but her arm faced straight through him. Her physical body was now at the malfunctioning camera, and before she could reach up to examine it, the Canadian used his blade to cut through her safety harness attachment. With a swift motion, he pushed her into space, using his jetpack as momentum to increase his force. His own tether to the station stopped him from flying out too far, but she watched in horror as her physical body flailed, struggling to slow down. Law of conservation of momentum. It was of no use. She saw her physical self reach for her jetpack, trying to turn it on. It didn't work. She watched herself try her radio. It didn't turn on. The Canadian smirked as he watched her thrash about uselessly. Enraged, her ghost form flew to him, throwing punches and kicks as the smirk was permanently stuck on his face. None landed. She stopped. Nothing could help her. No one would. She watched as her solid body floated away. Eventually, when her physical body was but a mere speck in the expanse of space, the alarms were turned on, the cameras reconnected. She closed her eyes in the cruelest defeat. When she opened them, she was on a spaceship. Hello, this is Michaela Simone Mack, author and writer of Creation, Book of Portals. Thank you so much for tuning in to the second season. I'm very excited to share this story with you. As always, every episode is coming out on Friday, so please stay tuned for next week. I would be greatly appreciative if you continue to listen, and also if you left comments about what you think about the story, and also if you shared it with your friends. Thank you so much. Have a great day. I'll speak to you again next Friday. Bye-bye.